participation. I want to remind the members to speak into their microphones and to announce their names so that we can hear them when they make a motion or a second. Also, if there are any first-time attendees, I would ask that you stand up at this time and please be recognized. Ma'am?
Good afternoon, everyone. Trista Coates, Deputy City Manager, City of Norfolk, sitting in for tax.
Thank you.
Good
Ma'am?
afternoon. I'm Ginger Bluntmore, City of Newport News, sitting in for Alan Archer.
Ma'am? Ma'am?
Good afternoon. I'm Michelle Taylor Fairby, and from the great city of Hampton, and I'm a city councilwoman.
Thank you. Can we all give them a round of applause? Moving right along on our agenda, we do have a need on item 2 for approval and modification of agenda. And I will ask for a motion and a second to approve the agenda as presented.
Motion to approve, Bobby Dyer.
Ella Ward, second.
We have a motion and a second.
Second, Chair O'Donnell.
No, any discussion on this item? Seeing none, would you please vote by saying A or nay?
Yeah, aye.
Tough crowd.
Tough crowd, first run. You guys know the drill. Don't shoot the messenger. Thank you. Agenda item number 3, public comments.
Mr. Chairman, we did not receive any comments prior to today's commission meeting. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to address the HRPDC today? Seeing none, sir, I'll forward it back to you for your chair's comments.
Thank you, Mr. Crum. Item number 4, chair report. And from time to time, the chair will take an opportunity to report on different items that is happening throughout the region. One of the things I want to remind everyone of is I had the opportunity of attending the Mayor's Institute on City Design at Harvard University this past quarter. And it was a great opportunity to get together with other mayors throughout the country to really look at city design and how we in urban areas are designing our cities with justice and equity involved in that. It was eye-opening to learn a lot of different things. And on behalf of those who attended, we will continue to bring forth information about that. The other thing that was appropriate and that I learned during that process was I earned a new title. I am not only just the mayor of the city of Portsmouth, but I am also the chief visionary officer of the city of Portsmouth. So you can address me in either way now. Thank you very much, and thank you for your attention. We're now moving to agenda item number 5, and Mr. Crum,
Yes,
you have the floor.
yes, sir.
Executive
Thank you.
Director's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to use my report today to have staff give some brief updates on a couple of items I think are of importance to the HRPDC. First, I'm going to ask Nikki Johnson, our regional economist, to come on up to the podium. At each of your places today, you will see Nikki's Hampton Roads Economic Monthly. And obviously, the economic trends, critical, everybody tracking those. So Nikki, appreciate you sharing a few thoughts with our commission today.
Thank you, Bob. Yes, in front of each of you is the May edition of the Hampton Roads Economic Monthly. Each issue includes a headline article that focuses on a timely topic shaping our regional economy. So you'll see that this month's article talked about the rising concern of stagflation, which is a rare but possible scenario that we're facing of both elevated inflation as well as a slowdown in economic growth. Now, the rest of the monthly just provides the latest economic data that's relevant to the region. And so just to highlight some key points there, you'll see like on that first page, US GDP contracted in the first quarter of 2025, and that was largely due to the surge in imports, right? So just front running to get ahead of the tariffs. We know that job growth slowed in the US, Virginia, and Hampton Roads. And then we also saw that our labor force contracted for the second straight month. And with both of those two dynamics, we also saw an increase in the unemployment rate. It increased to 3.5% for the latest data in March. That's still near historical lows, though. If you have any questions about any data that's in there, if you'd like to talk more, if you have any feedback about what's in the report, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm always happy to chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki. From there, we're going to call up Rebecca Eastip. Rebecca is one of our team members that supports Ask HR Green, our regional environmental education program. And we wanted to ask Rebecca to just give you a couple of, little bit of background information on those efforts today.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm going to provide a brief update about the results of our 2025 Hampton Roads Great American Cleanup, which was held March 28th and 29th. So just as a very basic overview, the Great American Cleanup is a program of Keep America Beautiful. It is the nation's largest community improvement program taking place annually in thousands of communities nationwide. So since 2019, the Ask HR Green Recycling and Beautification Committee has hosted a 2-day region-wide kickoff to the Great American Cleanup. The purpose of the event is to kickstart a season of cleaning and to encourage volunteers to participate in cleanup events throughout the year through the Team Up to Clean Up program. Volunteers who sign up for the Hampton Roads Great American Cleanup, can participate in an organized cleanup event, or they can host their own by leading something in their own neighborhoods. Activities they participate in include litter cleanups in land and water, tree plantings, park maintenance, and other beautification projects. So now we're pleased to share that we had another record-breaking year in 2025. We had over 3,400 volunteers improve 318 public spaces across Hampton Roads, and our number of volunteers is up by 1,000 over the last 2 years. Regionally, those volunteers tended gardens, improved shorelines, planted trees, and collected 5,200 trash bags of litter, which is an estimated 68 tons of collected litter. To put that into perspective for you, it's about the weight of 18 hippopotamuses. He's cute. So none of this would be possible without the partnership of our localities and our community partners. The thousands of volunteers who came out to support the event represented locality staff, military commands, churches and faith communities, businesses, large and small, and also just a lot of regular citizens who saw a need and wanted to come out to make a difference in their community. We want to give a particular shout out to the litter prevention and clean community coordinators in all of your localities. They are the boots on the ground support for these events. They are the ones making sure that volunteers have a project to work on, that they have the supplies that they need, safety vests and litter grabbers and trash bags. So it's a lot of work, and we definitely could not do it without their support. So I will wrap up just by sharing some pictures of the PDC TPO staff participating in a cleanup event this past March. And I thought you would appreciate seeing Greg dig this cozy coop out of the marsh behind our office. It definitely can be a dirty job sometimes, and you never know what you're going to find in those cleanups. But we're looking ahead to March 2026. We would encourage you to continue to speak locally about how we can grow the event year over year, and join us for 2026. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Mayor, you and I have talked about the changing landscape at the federal level, and an issue has come up within the last, probably 48 to 72 hours that we are trying to get ourselves educated on. And it is an item really important to the Hampton Roads region relative to rainfall predictions and flooding and issues as we prepare our community. So Ben McFarland's going to come up and give you a brief update on something called Atlas 15 and why this is an important item for the Hampton Roads region. And we are going to ask that you allow us to weigh in on this as a commission. So Ben, thanks for putting this together very, very quickly for us today.
Short notice. Thanks, Bob. Mr. Chair, members of the commission. I thought it would be longer before I would be back talking about rainfall design standards, but unfortunately not. So earlier this year, you all voted on recommendations for your localities to consider incorporating increased rainfall standards into your ordinances and policies. As a refresher, these sets that we use, these tools, they're essential for properly designing stormwater management infrastructure so that we can actually handle the amount of water that we anticipate seeing over the design life of a project. What we use to actually inform those decisions are NOAA's precipitation atlases. Right now, we use Atlas 14. Volume 2 covers Virginia. It's based on present day, and I use quotations there because it's not actually reflecting what we see today, but it's considered to be a present day rainfall precipitation atlas that's based on the assumptions of a stationary climate. So they're lumping all the data together. They're not accounting for different changes in climate trends. NOAA has been working for the last few years on a new product called Atlas 15 that's divided into 2 volumes. Volume 1 is an update to those present day rainfall amounts that would account for observed climate trends and changes that we've already seen. Volume 2 is a projection of future rainfall based on a lot of the climate science that we've already looked at for things like sea level rise, changing rainfall, temperature increase, and whatnot. In the last week, we found, we heard from staff at NOAA and from others that NOAA has been directed to pause work on Volume 2. We consider Volume 2 to be critical to providing the accurate and authoritative data and information that can be readily incorporated into our state regulatory requirements and into your local ordinances. Without this Volume 2, we're going to be left with doing a lot of piecemeal work at the locality level and also at state level. The end result really is that we'll get a lesser product for more time, more effort, and more money than we would if NOAA were to otherwise continue work on Atlas 15 Volume 2. And based on this development, we are recommending that the board authorize a letter to be sent to the Secretary of Commerce and the Chief of Staff of NOAA, who's currently performing the duties of the Director or the Administrator of NOAA, stating our strong support as a region for the continued work on Atlas 15 Volume 2. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Ben. And again, I want to thank Ben. This is a recent development. He really worked hard to pull some information together for you. Mr. Chairman, as we all know, rainfall events are changing in terms of their severity, how they're tracking. And, you know, what I've learned from our Water Resources Department is having this as a good updated tool. This Atlas 15 is very, very critical as we prepare our region. We would like to ask that the PDC give us authorization to work with you, Mr. Chairman, and to send correspondence to our federal partners, stressing the importance of not pausing this Atlas 15 update, but that we move forward with this important effort.
Absolutely. And are there any questions from any of the commissioners on this particular item?
Do you just need a motion today?
Yes, we would need a motion and a second and a vote.
So moved, Paul Kaplan.
Second, Ella Ward, Chesapeake.
Okay, so I guess there were no questions then. Okay,
Mr. Chair, I do have a question.
Ms. Still, ma'am, you have the floor.
What was the original timeline of when that work was supposed to be complete?
The preliminary data for Atlas 15 Volume 2 was supposed to be released for Virginia. That would cover Virginia later at the end of this year. And the final products were supposed to be delivered in 2026.
Okay. Just curious because, I mean, I'm hoping this helps, but I wanted to know how close we were to that deadline, if it's a month postponement or something like that to get back on track.
Thank you, Ms. Steele. So are there any other questions? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Any additional discussion? Then we will need a voice vote for this. All those in favor, please respond by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? You have it, sir.
Thank you, and thank you, Ben. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate everybody responding to that and being flexible as we continue to deal with emerging issues. Finally, under my report today, I hope when everybody came to the building you had a chance to see our new 757 bike rack out on the sidewalk outside of the boardroom. So here's a little slide that Jill Sunderland put together for us. But the work that you see out there, the welding, we really want to send a thank you to Mr. Tom Shirk and his students from the College and Career Academy at Prudence, Suffolk Public Schools. Elle, you'll be aware that this is the second time we have worked with this class. The first time, many of you did a photo with us around a recycling education piece that they welded for us. And Katie and Rebecca take that all around the region. I think it gets to more meetings than we do. It's been very, very visible. So as we were doing our sustainability parking lot, we wanted to do a bike rack, but we thought, you know, why not engage the class again? So all we really let them know is we needed a bike rack, and they designed it with the 757 theme. The holes they place in it are for you to lock your bike through the holes and be able to lock your bike to the bike rack. And then they got it painted, and it was delivered just this week. It weighs 350 pounds, sir. So they really gave us a piece that I don't think is going anywhere. But here's a photo of the class. Just super proud and always excited to work with high school students. I took Mr. Hipple out. He gave it the inspection. Sir, I think we got the thumbs up. Yep. They passed, right? But Mr. Chairman, always fun and exciting to engage with our young people. And always just a reminder what incredible talent we have here in this region, and to be able to engage them in this way was super, super exciting.
Well, thank you once again, and we want to thank those young people for their efforts. And while Bob and I were having the discussion, I thought it might be a good idea for those young people to receive some type of recognition from the chair of the HRPDC. So I intend to write a letter on behalf of all of you, congratulating them and thanking them for their efforts on our bike rack. Is that okay with everyone?
Jill, do you approve?
Very good. Thank you. Thank you again.
Very good. Mr. Chairman, our Community Advisory Committee is not represented today. I can report that they did hold a meeting down at Nauticus and discussed a number of important regional issues. Sir, that will lead us to our consent agenda for today. Your consent agenda is included as an attachment for you in your agenda package. Sir, I would ask that the commission consider approving items A through and including I in today's consent agenda.
Thank you, Bob. And with that ask, we will move forward and call for a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda items as they are presented.
Motion for approval, Hippel, James City.
Ella Ward, second. Chesapeake.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any additional discussion? Seeing none, if you would please note your vote, once we call for a vote, saying raise your hand or aye. So, yep, so all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. The
Thank-
item is approved.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chairman, our next item will be a briefing by Teelan Hansen, our Chief Financial Officer, on our HRPDC proposed budget for the fiscal year that begins on July 1.
Good afternoon. Many of you had the opportunity to listen to this presentation at the TPO meeting, and so we're going to shorten it significantly here for the PDC meeting. But I would remind you all that the information on the budget is in your packets, and you have all the information. So we're going to jump right into, we're going to skip some slides. We're going to jump right into what the budget looks like. And again, I apologize for the very small font on this particular slide, but I will draw your attention to a few numbers. The total budget for the HRPDC and the TPO combined is in the blue lines, and it is 35.4 million, or just a little bit above 35.4 million. Of that 35.4 million, we have right around 24.4 million. That's the yellow highlighted lines. That is pass-through funding that goes through our organization, and we pass that through to various community organizations and vendors to get the work done for our region and for the work programs that we have. What I'd like to focus on is the pink line there, which is our operating budget, which is the money that we take in to operate the PDC and the TPO. And that line is right at just a little bit above, just right at $11.1 million for the fiscal year 2026 proposed budget. We're gonna, again, we're skipping some slides this afternoon. So this slide, I wanted to show you one of the sources of those revenue that we get from our operating is both our state allocation that we get as well as our member dues from your organizations and localities. This is a slide on the left. You have what the historical amount, the green is the member dues, the orange is the state allocation, and then the blue is combined. And you can see the historical trends of those numbers. On the left, we have the actual dollar amounts as they were in the year that's reported. And on the right, we have inflation adjusted those numbers so that you can see that while the actual number has grown, the dollar buying power of that number has actually gone down because of inflation and the challenges that we face from a funding perspective. Talking about the fiscal year 2026 operating budget from an expenditure side of things, the operating expenditures, excluding some contingencies that we have built in the transportation budget, is just about $8.6 million for fiscal year 2026. The majority of those expenditures are related to personnel. So 80% of our expenditure budget is taken in personnel costs. We have included a 3% general wage increase for our staff included in this budget, and that is built into that $8.6 million. We have also seen an increase in our health insurance costs for the staff of approximately $53,000, and I wanted to point out that that was also included in this budget. We have some new water supply planning grants, and I believe Ivy is going to come up here shortly after I am and talk about what that means, but we have included those in the budget. We've received an increase in our transportation planning funding of about $128,000 for fiscal year 26. For our transit funding, excuse me, we did not have the approved fiscal year 26 levels at the time we developed this budget. So currently they are funded at the fiscal year 2025 levels. We did receive final confirmation on the funding for our transit funding just last week. And so we did get about a $28,000 increase in that funding. However, it is not built into this budget yet, and there will be a budget amendments that we bring back to you once the federal picture has settled down just a little bit. I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the future challenges that we as an organization face. One is a lack of flexible funding streams. Our funding streams are fairly set. We have some most of our revenue is dedicated funding in the form of grants or program revenue that comes in that we have to spend on certain things. And about 25% of our funding we are allowed to use for a little more flexibility. And so with a 75%, 25% split, our funding streams are somewhat inflexible. Our revenue does not grow at a pace that is going to be able to keep up in the future. Everyone is aware that the federal picture is somewhat unpredictable at this point in time, and we know that there is a budget bill that is making its way through. We know there's going to be some impacts on our operational and our grant programs and work programs. Again, once that picture settles down and the federal government passes their budget, we will bring budget amendments back to the boards that relate to as that clears up and we know how that affects us. We have building infrastructure and facilities technology that we need to invest in, and we are setting aside reserves to be able to do that. Cash flow, of course, being 80% funded by grants. We have an issue where it comes, predominantly all those grants are done on a reimbursement basis. So cash flow continues to be a challenge for us, which is why we have reserves and why we have unassigned fund balance in order to pivot and be able to send the checks out the door while we're waiting reimbursement. We're right at the threshold of 50 employees. We're at 49, I believe, right now. And when we topple over 50, then we're going to have some additional requirements that come upon us from an operating standpoint. And of course, like everyone, we are dealing with inflation issues. So I'm happy to answer any questions. I told you it would be much briefer than this morning. I'm happy to answer any questions that any of you have on the budget. The Personnel and Budget Committee has recommended this. The TPO approved the budget this morning from their side, and we are asking that this body also take action to approve the fiscal year 2026 proposed budget. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, we would ask that the commission consider taking action this afternoon to approve our budget that was developed by our Personnel and Budget Committee. It's before the commission for their pending action.
Thank you, Bob. And once again, thank you all for all the work that you've done in putting that budget together. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in need of a motion and a second to approve this fiscal year 26 budget as recommended by the HRPDC and the HRTPO, Joint Personnel and Budget Committee. Do we have a motion?
Mr. Chair. Second.
Paul
Hippel,
Kaplan.
James.
Who was the first motion?
Ross
Dr.
Hammond, Virginia Beach.
Yeah. You do have a motion and a second. Is there any additional discussion? Seeing none, I will now call for the voice vote. So all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
if I could just say, Virginia Beach has to adjourn from this meeting. Today, we are having our annual memorial for our fallen officers at 2:00. And, we just beg your indulgence in this and to say, moving forward, violence is something that does not honor anyone's borders. And, sadly, we're going to be remembering 2 fallen police officers recently. And it really brings things home in a way of significant magnitude. And it's a situation we all share, and we're going to deal with it. We will deal with it as a community. Thank you all. God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, and your city and your police force and all those first responders are in our thoughts and prayers.
Mr. Chairman, we're going to move on to our next presentation. We have Ivy Osman from our Water Resources Department. Ivy's going to discuss with the commission our regional water supply planning efforts and what you can expect as this process continues to advance. Ivy?
Thank you, Mr. Crum. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm pleased to talk to you today about the water supply planning process. You may recall this process if you've been in local government for some time. It's an iterative planning document that's developed, and we're embarking on developing the updated plan that will be turned into the state by 2029. So a lot of the material that I'll cover today, you may already be familiar with from previous presentations on this topic, but there were some changes in the regulation that was amended last year. So I'll cover those today. And one more thing before we jump in, all of the photos that you see throughout this presentation were taken from local and state partners of the beautiful natural areas that surround our water supplies across Hampton Road. So make sure you check them out if you have the opportunity. So the water supply planning process has 5 major overarching goals. Of course, the most primary and important one that jumps out to everyone immediately is to ensure that we have adequate, safe drinking water for populations that are here in Hampton Roads and across the state, and also adequate water for economic development projects. Of course, we don't want to consume all of the water as humans and leave nothing for the environment. So there's also a goal of protecting beneficial uses as well, aquatic habitat, recreation, uses of the different water bodies. The plans also encourage alternative water source development. So typically we think about water supplies coming from surface water, lakes, reservoirs, and groundwater. But increasingly, as water supply becomes more challenging across the state wants to encourage development of alternatives. You may be familiar with the Sustainable Water Initiative for Tomorrow that HRSD is conducting. That is just one example. Promoting water conservation is another pillar for water supply planning. All of the water that we use, we want to make sure we're using it wisely. So that's a major goal for planning across the state. And the most important piece here is that by planning together, we can identify opportunities for different localities that are neighboring or within a region to collaborate on unique projects to improve water supply status around the different regions of the state. Because as we know, water does not adhere to the political boundaries that we draw, and it's considered a shared resource in the state of Virginia. So I talked a little bit about the goals of the plan, but the reason that the state wants us to make sure that we turn these plans into them every 10 years is to get a status of what water management looks like in an individual region. And you'll recall, if you've been involved in local government for some time, that Hampton Roads was one of the first regions to develop a regional water supply plan. Prior to the amendment of the water regulation or the water supply planning regulation last fall, localities could submit individual water supply plans to the state. Hampton Roads was one of the leaders in the space of developing one regionally. Our last plan was published in 2011. That's the cover you see on screen here. And yeah, so we were a leader in developing these jointly. And we'll go forward producing them every 10 years with a 5-year update on data that goes to the Department of Environmental Quality as well. And the reason that the DEQ wants us to produce these is because they take all of the regional plans that are developed or locality plans and they roll them up into the State Water Resources Plan. This is an overarching document that helps the DEQ manage water supplies and water resources across the state and gives them an idea of any potential shortfalls that may develop and helps them develop strategies to manage water, which is one of the charges that they have in the Commonwealth. So zooming into Hampton Roads, the PDC falls into this space by playing a coordinating role with the localities across the region. We work with the individual plan representatives to get their input data for their locality and incorporate it into the plan. And we also coordinate all the applications for grants that we go after to support this work. And the Department of Environmental Quality this year will award the Hampton Roads Planning District with over $23,000 in grants for this fiscal year, and will apply again next fiscal year. And you may balk or take a note that the fiscal year 25 seems like we're late in the game, and that was because the state amended the regulation in November of last year, and they had a very serious time crunch to roll those funds out to the different localities or regional organizations. And so we don't have a deadline to complete the work under that grant. In the fiscal year 25, it can continue. And then, yes, we'll get a different process next year now that the plan is more developed by DEQ. Now, the timeline that's on screen here just looks out toward the next 5 or 4 years where we'll develop the plan. We've met our first 2 regulatory milestones on the bottom of the slide here, where we submitted the locality planning representative contact information to the state, and we also held our water supply planning kickoff meeting here at the regional building on April 2nd. I mentioned the grant award earlier. We'll use that money and additional funding to work on developing the plan over the next 3 years. You'll notice that our goal is to have that first draft of the plan prepared in summer of 2028, and the official deadline for submission of the plan to the state is not until October. That's by design so that we have time to get any locality approvals or have time to address any administrative requirements before we can submit that water supply planning package to the state for review. So I mentioned before that the state regulation was amended, and as part of those amendments, they're now requiring regional preparation of water supply plans. And I have the entire Hampton Roads area plus New Kent County on the screen here. In that 2011 plan, all of Hampton Roads developed the joint plan, and we submitted one. The new regulation outlines the different regional planning areas or RPAs throughout the state. And they divided Hampton Roads into the Southeast Virginia RPA and the Green and the York and James River 2 on the peninsulas. And they allowed for any locality that was drawn in an RPA to request reassignment should they want to work in developing their regional plans with their neighbors if they had shared water resources that cross their boundaries. New Kent requested that reassignment and it was approved by the state, so they'll be working with Hampton Roads on this iteration of the plan. And we don't do it alone. We do it in collaboration with the localities. Monthly, we meet with the Directors of Utilities Committee. They serve as our advisory committee. And we also have locality representatives that were designated by your leadership to assist in plan development. So the data that we'll be requesting and the information we'll be gathering in collaboration with your staffs and maybe even some of you will be the following things that I'll note. So most importantly, water supply plan, you want to inventory all of your water sources. So these are all of the groundwater and surface water supplies that are used throughout the region. We also collect data on historical water withdrawals. Those are the withdrawals from the groundwater and surface water sources, and then the way that the water is used by the water system. So their average use throughout the system and any peak demands that are experienced throughout the year. We'll also gather an inventory of all of the water systems and not just the local municipally owned and operated systems, but also any private community water systems throughout the region and any self-supplied groundwater users as well. A lot of those data come from the state. They're supplied by the DEQ, and we do additional on-the-ground research to identify any others that may be missing from the DEQ lists. We also collect data on the projected water demands that the localities anticipate. These incorporate the demands not only for population growth, but any economic development that is planned or projected. We want to know about conservation programs that are ongoing. As I mentioned earlier, it's a major goal for the water supply planning process to use our water wisely. So we want to hear about the water loss programs and leak detection programs that are operational throughout the localities. And in a corollary to that, we also want to document all of the action plans that exist for drought response throughout the region. Many of you will be familiar with this from historic droughts where we've had to reduce irrigation or non-drinking water consumption uses of water. Those are the strategies that we'll want to hear about. And a new element that was added to the water supply planning regulation after this last revision was the incorporation of risk identification and strategy development for any risks that localities identify for their water supplies. So this is a very comprehensive scope in terms of the risks that can be identified. The regulation encourages any risks that you can think of, but to be specific, shortfalls in water and climate risks with changes in patterns and the delivery of water to our traditional water sources are just two examples. And that's the roundup on where we are today and where we'll be heading over the next 4 years. I'm happy to take any questions anytime. My contact information is here, and you can find it on the web as well. Thank you.
We do have a question, sir. You have the floor.
Yeah, thanks for that presentation. On one of the first slides, I think it was in the planning phase, you noted encourage alternate water source. Could you expand on that?
Sure. These are, so not every locality has a or an availability in permitting for their groundwater supplies that occur underneath of them. The state has limitations on those withdrawals, or in many localities also don't have the fortune of having a surface water that they own within their locality. And so if they're limited in the supplies that are available to them, there are lots of different strategies. An example being reuse water. So water that has been used for some purpose, and it doesn't necessarily have to be municipal wastewater. It can be from other sources that's then treated and then reused as a water source. There are examples throughout the region where this is happening for not so much for drinking water, but for cooling at some of our military facilities in agreements with neighbors that, like HRSD, that are treating water and then sending it to Dam Neck, for example, as a way to cool the infrastructure on the facilities there.
Mr. Hippel, sir?
Thanks, sir.
Yeah,
Couple of things. I think probably the first and most important thing would be how much water we have. I've asked tons of people, senators and everything. No one has a clue. And we're making rules about something, not this group, but higher up, making rules about what you can and can't use when they don't know how much there is to use or not to use. So that it's kind of, backwards to me. I'd like to know how much money I have in the bank before I go saying I'm gonna spend X amount. Same with the water. In James City County, we go back and forth. The water we use for drinking in the water West Point, and not picking on West Point uses for the paper mill are counted the same.
Mhm.
Well, I don't think that should be counted the same. And I know you go up against big paper mills and all that, the amount of water they're using, and they got the river right there, and maybe they can clean it and use that. And that's West Point's job, not mine. But we're being compared in James City County and trying to be cut for the amount of drinking water for our citizens to survive against somebody who's making money putting a product out. Now, I'm all for making money. I love making money, so I'm not against that. And but that's kind of unfair to our citizens. So first would be, how much water do we have? What is our amount? And then it's almost like putting the cart in front of the horse. So we need to know that, and then that would be the first, and would show our resources, and number one would be drinking water. And then we talk about all the time, our drinking water goes a portion to drinking and a portion to irrigation. Well, there's different ways you can use things now to irrigate and do that. And also in this, I don't know if you've included, I know you've got other source and all that, are private wells included in that?
Yes, sir, they are.
Okay.
Yes, they'll be captured in the plan. And to speak to the estimates for water supplies, both groundwater and surface water volumes are estimated using models that the state operates, or their consultants to the state operate. And in terms of the groundwater the issue that you're talking about in James City County, and then elsewhere, Western Tidewater has the same issues.
Yep.
And many other places as well. But where the HRPDC, Ms. Whitney Catchmark, serves on the Eastern Virginia Groundwater Management Advisory Committee, and that's an active area of discussion right now, how we can better improve the data that go into the model so that we get more close reflections of what actually is in the ground and available for use, so that if projects like the swift injection of groundwater here in Southern Hampton Road, soon to be in Newport News, if that ends up raising water levels throughout the state, we would really like to see that be incorporated into the management strategies that DEQ is using. And so that's an active area where we're trying to advocate for improvements in the models, and the state is working really hard to adopt changes that make sense, because it's in their interest as well to make sure that they can best estimate those numbers so that they can do those demand calculations.
And I noticed that, that the level was going down. Now the level in groundwater is coming up. But then I just read something this morning about land subsidence and that level's going back down. I don't know how it's fluctuated. And I think that's what we don't have a grasp on, is what do we actually have in the bank as far as drinking water? Because I tell our board and the citizens in James City County, drinking water is gold. Without it, you're done. So you're gonna live on a Coca-Cola very long. You need drinking water. And so, I would like to see come out of this, not their model and what they're saying, because everyone I've talked to said, well, we got a model that's doing this and saying this, and nobody's produced it. If they have, they haven't produced it to me. So it makes me wonder and very curious of how much do we have, and then, okay, how do we share that? Because some communities need more than other communities, and how do we share that? How do we work together regionally, like we've done with transportation and everything else on this water issue? I think water issue is one of our biggest issues. As I always said, that when the earth was flooded, if God had a sense of humor, he may take the water away next time and go, how you like that? So maybe we ought to plan for, if we lose our water.
And
My two
that's
cents.
absolutely, that's a major driver of this process. And I'll make sure to follow up with you after the meeting to connect you with some resources to hopefully get some information. We can talk about gaps and where you'd like to see some change.
Several of us went on a tour recently that took us. One of the stops was you just mentioned it, the Hampton Road Sanitation District, where they'll be infusing, maybe the wrong word, but 50 million gallons a day between the two plants of cleaned water that's cleaned so well from sewage that they have to put dirt into it to put it into the aquifer that many of us share. I don't think the state or federal agencies have looked at, Franklin was actually the largest the Franklin paper mill, which is not actually in Franklin, but used more water than anybody, even more than West Point. But since they've repurposed their mill, they've gone from, I don't know what the numbers are, but about 25% less, using about 25% of the water they were using when they were a fine paper mill. Franklin, like so many of us, several of us at least, are strictly groundwater. We don't have a water filtration plant. It would cost us more than we could afford to even tap into a pipeline to go to Suffolk or someplace else where we could pick up treated water. So we're really stuck, and we're almost at our limit. And Franklin's starting to grow. We have about 600 for a city of 8 square miles. We have about 600 or 700 homes being built, and for us, that's going to mean we can't bring any industry in. We need industry more than we do homes for tax purposes. We want both, but it really locks us in. So I know we're near the limit. I'm sure our public works folks are on your committee.
Yes, they are. And we're working with a few of the Western Tidewater localities right now to potentially develop a master water plan to look at that and some of the groundwater limits that everyone's facing and what we could do about that to potentially ameliorate that situation.
When the volume is up and they're still keeping us
And
a low level, yeah.
Yeah, and it's actually the data that were collected during the shutdown of the mill that were analyzed here by Ms. Catchmark. They were used recently in our discussions with the Department of Environmental Quality to show how groundwater levels rebounded quickly after that as a surrogate kind of example to what we expect to see with the swift water injections. And it really I think was a light bulb moment for many of the groundwater staff at the state, because they did see how quickly the water levels propagated across the state during that shutdown. And we're going to likely see much of the same when that full-scale SWIFT facility comes online.
Of course, some of our groundwater, I think, goes to Norfolk too.
Well, the Eastern Virginia groundwater management area covers a few aquifers that extend from the eastern seaboard out to about I-95. And they
Right.
go all the way up to
Delaware.
Fredericksburg. Yep, Delaware, exactly,
Delaware.
yes.
And down to South Carolina.
That's right, the coastal
And
plain
it's a
aquifer
closed system. There's no water going into it except what's being put back into it.
There's
and
a slight little bit of water at the fall line
fall line.
that goes in, but you're right, that it is limited.
Well, thank you all for that robust water discussion, and we'll
So,
continue.
Mr. Chairman, first off, commission members, thank you for that conversation. This is a huge lift, to do a regional water supply plan. Thank you for bringing up those issues, because Ivy, I think you'd agree, this is exactly why we do this plan, right? These are all
Correct,
the
yeah.
challenges and hopefully some opportunities that we need to look at in this type of a comprehensive planning effort. I must say though, this is another example where the PDC provides cost savings. For us to be able to have the staff here to quarterback this planning effort, to bring all the partners together without needing to bring in consultants, and be able to do that working with your staffs. We're incredibly proud of that value add, but this doesn't work without our staff having great collaboration and working relationships with your local government staffs. And fortunately, Ivy and Whitney, you're in great hands, because they're working with your staffs on a daily basis. And, Ivy, those relationships are going to pay dividends now in this planning process. So I want to thank Ivy and Whitney for their work and setting the stage for this. And we just really look forward to engaging with you. And Ivy will be back with updates, right? As we
I
go.
sure will, yes.
All right.
Looking forward to working with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Ivy.
Mr. Chairman, our next item will be a report on emergency management activities. When you talk about regionalism in Hampton Roads, this is a great example of how your emergency response people and preparedness people convene here in this building and work together. And our quarterback for this effort, we have a lot of quarterbacks here, but John Sadler really is the coordinator. So John, excited to hear your update.
Thank you. Good afternoon. John Sadler, Regional Emergency Management Administrator, PDC. I wanted to give everybody here just a very broad overview of the things going on in emergency management. Before I begin, I just want to say this is by no means comprehensive of everything going on. This is just the major projects that the PDC is involved in. So before I talk about the what, let's talk about the why. What guides our efforts in emergency management? What drives our efforts in allocating resources to specific areas and not others? Our first guiding document is called the Region 5 measure, or the THIRA, which is, and you have to apologize, EM loves our acronyms. THIRA is the Threat and Hazard Identification and Risk Assessment. FEMA issues 33 core capabilities that they say you should be able to do in every single emergency. We look at what they say we should be able to do, what we can do, and that difference is our capability gap, and that's where we spend our time and effort. The next thing is obviously grant requirements. Federal government does not like to give money without telling you how to spend it and what you need to do to get it. So with those grants comes some things that we need to do on our end. And lastly, of course, is directives from our leadership, this body, the city managers, FEMA, the governor, and even some things that happen after real events. At the center of everything regional emergency management in Hampton Roads is the All Hazards Advisory Committee. That is an advisory committee to this board with all 17 localities represented, and any and everybody that can come to assist in emergency. I think we're up to 40 additional members from partner agencies throughout the region that will help us when it comes time to respond to a disaster. The EM department has 2 full-time positions, one myself and another fully grant funded. That's Tammy. If you all recall, during the last meeting, we honored her with an award that she received from the International Association of Emergency Management. So I'll start with some subcommittees, and then I'll start with what the AHAC is doing, and then all has advisory committee, and then I'll go to some of our subcommittees and working groups. What you see on the left here is our standing subcommittees. On the right are working groups. The names pretty much describe what they do, with the exception of the Urban Area Working Group. That is a federally mandated group that we have to have in place to receive the Urban Area Security Initiative grant. So they're responsible for deciding what gets funded out of that grant on a yearly basis. So what's the All Hazards Advisory Committee recently completed? Well, we recently completed what's known as a Common Operating Picture Tool. So if some of you have been around long enough to remember the VDOM calls before a disaster, where they would go through each jurisdiction and ask what your EOC status, are you opening shelters, so on and so forth. So your emergency managers are already providing that information to the state with their situational reports. So we worked with VDOM to create a tool that takes that data from the situational reports and puts it in a more visual graph so we can get off those calls a lot faster and actually respond to the disaster. We also completed a crisis communication framework. This is for your public information officers. I believe the number is somewhere around half of the citizens in Hampton Roads work in one locality, live in another. So if one locality is saying one thing and that other locality is saying something else, and then something comes down from VDOM, that will lead to some confusion. So that provides the framework for your PIOs to come together in what's called a joint information center, better coordinate that messages so we can get the right and timely information to the citizens. Lastly, we've completed a regional logistics framework. This is all about resource deconfliction. If you all remember, around 2011 or 12, there was the 4-day snow event. Most of us call Snowmageddon. Every locality was after salt. There was just not enough salt to go around. So this basically lays the groundwork for how your localities can identify those resources that they need and deconflict them in the time of a response. So what are we currently working on now? So every time you do a plan or a framework, you want to exercise it. So we are currently trying to plan an exercise. Right now, the idea is to mirror the Baltimore shipwreck incident somewhere here. Obviously, it'll be a tabletop. So we want to do that exercise. Unfortunately, as we heard earlier today, there's a lot of uncertainty with federal funding. And we just recently came through an issue where FEMA implemented a manual review process, which stopped the reimbursement of these grants. And I single-handedly broke the PDC budget. So as soon as we have a little bit more certainty, we can get that project going. We're also working on operational coordination. Since we have this new tool, there are other tools involved. From a regional perspective, at what point do, say, you start inputting in that tool? If it's something that's affecting half the region, should the other region do it? What are the triggers that will let your EMs know that, hey, they need to put information into their sit reps, they need to share information on resources, so on and so forth. And lastly, all the initiatives that I just said, they were funded by the Urban Area Security Initiative. And questions, especially in today's climate, is what happens if that grant goes away? So we're looking at ways to sustain all the capabilities that that grant has funded moving forward in the event that we no longer have that grant. And there's also things that the PDC does on a recurring basis. including update to our regional hazard mitigation plan. Our last update was in 2022. Our next update is due in 2025. We were initially selected for funding under the BRIC grant. However, the BRIC grant is no more, so we have switched that application to a different grant program and are waiting to hear back from that. There's the THIRA that I spoke about earlier. This is another one of those things we have to do annually that is required to receive the Urban Area Security Initiative grant. And you also may have seen in your consent items a lot of permissions to purchase a lot of vehicles. Things like your shelter support units, disaster medical support units, MRATs, which are the little tiny ambulances you see here, as well as mass casualty buses. These are things that we buy on behalf of the Metropolitan Medical Response System. They're ineligible to receive the grant as they're not a government entity, so we serve as their fiduciary agent. And these things are constantly need to be procured, maintained, stocked, and eventually replaced. So we just got through purchasing the buses and the MRATs for all the localities that want one. And now we're working on the disaster medical support units. These are the trailers that you might see outside of your EOC. They're up for replacement, as well as overseeing and maintaining eligibility of the WASI grant as a whole. Now we'll start with some of our subcommittees. In 2018, DHS said that if you want to keep getting this WASI grant, you have to spend some of it on cybersecurity. So we kind of started from nothing and copied the method we did with our THIRA. And we started with an assessment of all of your local networks. The gold standard for cybersecurity rules and regulations guidelines is from the National Institute of Science and Technology, often referred to as the NIST. And that assessment highlighted the gaps that you see here that were addressed with these projects, all the way down to the penetration testing, which again, we are waiting for a little bit more clarity on the federal level before we can implement. Our interoperable communications subcommittee, this is your radio guys, obviously, for the emergency communications. They recently completed an Orion assessment. Orion is an overlay regional interoperability network. It is essentially a separate radio system shared by the region that lays on top of your locality emergency radio systems. We looked at who's using it, why they're using it, what's the state of the equipment. Some of you may be aware that that's where the HR IRIS recommendation came out of. That was not voted on favorably, so we ditched that, and now we're going back to the Orion system, and we're trying to formalize its use, sustainment, and governance with the Orion manual. And as usual, there's equipment associated with these networks that constantly need to be replaced and upgraded. So we have a radio cache, CALS, which is another acronym for Sailor on Wheels, our communications bus housed in Suffolk. We recently got our Franklin water tower up and running. And we are currently purchasing repeater towers for what's called the HR TACRAN. HR TACRAN is essentially the main support for the Orion system. So if Orion's your roads, HR TACRAN is your interstate. And again, I just wanted to emphasize that everything that I've said here is by no means encompassing of all the EM work going on in the region. Your first responders, emergency managers are working tirelessly within your locality, across localities, state and federal government. And I could talk for hours on the things that I've not covered here. So just wanted to give them the acknowledgement that they're due. And with that, I'll be glad to take any questions.
Are there any questions from anyone?
I have a comment.
Ma'am, you have the floor.
Here. I just wanted to share that I know that there have been a real uptake, an increase in the number of cyber attacks of local governments in the state of Virginia. And what's I found interesting is that they do not get handled by EM. And I think EM might think they're supposed to jump in and help, but that's not what experience is saying, that there are other people. And so I just can't say but too much, actually, because these things are very, very tricky and confidential. But I just kind of wanted to put that out there because that same message may come to you more as additional attacks occur.
Absolutely.
Thank you, man. Sir.
Hey,
you have the
John,
floor.
understand that there's a VOPEX exercise coming up this summer, is that correct?
I believe so. I believe
And
it's.
how are we addressing the challenges associated with some of the, I'm gonna say either cuts or modifications in FEMA that may surround those exercises?
For that exercise in particular, that's actually VDM driven. I'm not sure how they are going to do it just yet. But as I said earlier, everything on that presentation that I just spoke about was funded by the UASI grant. And year to year, we don't know if we're going to get it, especially now during this time.
Yeah, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I just know our emergency managers are really struggling with some of the unknowns as we are as elected officials also, when it comes to FEMA and their participation in things like the VOPEX exercise, which is really important to a lot of the localities in Hampton Roads. So I didn't know if you were able to comment on that, but I appreciate it because I know you weren't prepared to do so. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, John.
Thanks, John. I think that, one of the things we just want to stress is your staff's coming together, working with John and us being able to get access to this federal funding, and a lot of that money that we're able to front on your behalf. And you can pull money here and then access federal grants to get reimbursed. Again, is another value add that we're proud to provide to the Hampton Roads region. So appreciate you giving John a few minutes there to share.
Sure.
To share some of those great efforts. Mr. Chairman, finally today, Greg Grutendorf is going to give you a quick update on our regional housing assessment. Great.
Just wanted to add something back to John's presentation on EM. Over the years, John and his staff have brought tens of millions of dollars into the region that go to your localities on equipment. So they've just done a fantastic job. This room is routinely full of EM staff from across the region who are working together. And I was just talking to Chair about it. It's truly a sight to see when you walk in here and see all your emergency managers working together to face things that come to the region. And John just does a phenomenal job of getting that group together. So I'm not Shernita. Shernita is celebrating her daughter who is graduating college this month. So I am standing in her place, and I will do this probably as quick as I can. We just wanted to provide you an update on what's going on with the regional housing assessment. It's been some time. For some of you who don't know, who haven't been around, this effort actually started back in 2022. There was a lot of conversation about numerous things in the region that are affecting the housing community. And I say things because they're so broad-based. So in 2023, we put together this group of 12 folks from our board who comprised the Regional Housing Assessment Working Group, and we began going around the region talking with different folks and really kind of investigating what are the issues in housing in Hampton Roads. And Shernita did kind of a very interesting thing. She'd start most meetings with what's the most pressing issue in housing. And as you might expect, everyone had a different answer, right? The issue that's most pressing depends really on who's looking at the issue and who's being affected. And these things change constantly. So anything from existing homeowners, poverty, homelessness, special populations like seniors and veterans, home ownership, rental, and then numerous issues under that. There is no one pressing issue. There are many pressing issues, and our working group was exposed to that. Another thing that we recognize is there are tons of housing plans. You know, the state has a housing plan, localities have a comprehensive plan, they have housing plan. The feds have housing plans through HUD and others. There's community partners that do it, the military. But there's not a regional housing plan. And this is not really an attempt to develop a housing plan, but housing is very much a regional issue. And when you come in here, 50% of the people who live in your locality, depending on locality, but on average in Hampton Roads, 50% of the people get up and go to work in another jurisdiction. Housing is fluid across the region, right? We look at the labor force shed. Where people live and where people work are very different. So housing is very much a regional issue. And we've never really delved into this we've never done this for Hampton Roads where we said, let's take an environmental shot, the landscape that is in housing, and let's tie it to what the feds are doing, the state, the localities, economic value, all these partners. We've never done this, and we need to do this in a way that's specific to Hampton Roads because we're unique. Hampton Roads is not like any other place. What we're recognizing, of course, right now is the landscape is changing pretty drastically, especially at the federal level. A couple weeks ago, Taylor McCormick from 4Kids was at this very podium talking about exactly what they're seeing in terms of changes at the federal level. And it's terrifying, especially for folks who are in the place that they're looking for housing and providing these services. So when we got together with the group, one of the things that we discussed is how housing intersects with so many other things, right? A lot of you folks may have heard of housing first, right? In order to address social issues, you got to house people first. But housing's tied to everything from transportation to employment to quality of life, education, safety, well-being. Housing wraps into all these things. So it's not like you can just address housing on its own without addressing some of these other things. And that's really kind of what drove what we wanted to do with this housing assessment. We wanted to consider those intersections, develop an analysis of current policies, strategies, conditions. The second thing was a gap analysis, develop best practices and toolkits, look at housing strategies related to transportation and economic development, and then also look at the impact of defense and military presence. One of the things that we recognized very quick is people were like getting a little bit scared by a regional housing plan, like we're going to do something. So we said, well, what this is essentially is an analysis of supply. What is the supply of services, programs, resources, and even housing? And then look at the demand. Hey, sounds very economics-like, right? Supply, demand. And then do an assessment of access to housing across the region. What it is not, it's not just a collection of locality plans or a state plan. It's not a directive in any way for localities or nonprofit, and it's not a static document, right? The desired outcomes here are really, let's determine where the gaps are. How do we improve access? How do we share best practices, models, toolkits, right? Some of the things that are happening in James City County can be very similar to what's happening in neighborhoods in Suffolk. Let's share that. We want to better leverage state and federal resources. We want to look at the intersection, like I said, with transportation and economic development. You'll hear Doug Smith from the Alliance say housing is very much an economic development issue right now. It's a huge economic development issue. We recognize that. But in general, we want to increase access to housing for Hampton Roads residents and improve quality of life and have housing for all. So late last night, Sharnita got an email from Virginia Housing. We have been really pushing for as I said, this started way back in 2022. So some of you all is like, what is going on? Getting this funding has been a little bit trickier. This is something new. This is something different. But late last night, Sharnita got an email that we're in the final review and they're looking at the contract. So that's fantastic. We've already submitted a draft RFP. We will have follow-up meetings with local funding partner LISC, and staff have been continuing to compile local studies to include in the assessment. And once we get, we hope, I mean, we're right there, I think, knocking at the door of Virginia Housing. Once we get the award, we will reconvene the housing assessment work group to start moving forward. So I showed the slide at the beginning. One of the things that we recognize is through this process, we've lost several members. Randy's laughing right now because his name is suddenly in light gray. Because he told me, hey, you only got me for a couple more months, but the time is getting short. So we will be looking to fill this back out so that we have representation across the region as we're moving forward, which should be pretty soon. And then we will get that housing assessment underway. So if you hear us asking for help and representation in filling this out, please pick up the phone and help us. So anyways, like I said, I'd be really quick. Pavitra said she was going to time me. But that concludes my remarks and Sharnita's presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Greg. And I do want to let Randy know, we're not letting you go yet, sir. In addition to that, we have filled one of the positions in the city of Portsmouth, so we certainly would take any recommendations that you all may have to add folks to the effort. I don't think we have any questions, so thank you again, Greg.
So, Mr. Chairman, the remaining items are all included in your agenda package for your information. You can look at it at your leisure. As a reminder, we take the month of June off, so we'll be back with the TPO and PDC meetings in July. Sir, if I may, I would just like to conclude my comments today by making a very quick introduction, if I could. I think Marcellus Nixon is still in the room. Is that the case, Marcel? Yes, sir. I'd like to quickly introduce Mr. Marcellus Nixon. Marcellus is, can I still say new Marcellus? I think I can. The new executive director of our broadband authority, currently known as the Southside Network Authority, but with our work with the peninsula and the fact that we're coming your way, soon to be rebranded to be a more regional authority name. But Marcellus brings an incredible set of expertise to our region. If you are interested in fiber, what that means to economic development, what that means to modernizing and making your communities economically competitive, please see Marcellus. I've learned a ton from him already. He's a great source of information. Marcellus, we'll be working together later this year. Marcellus will be on your agenda. I just thought I'd invite him in today so he could see what the PDC is all about. So Marcellus, great to have you here.
Welcome, Marcellus.
Mr. Chairman, before we adjourn, I'd like to publicly thank our friends over at Isle of White County. The city of Franklin was in a tough situation recently with a loss of a number of our people in our planning and community development. And through assistance from Mr. Keaton and his staff, we were able to keep our building permits going, our inspections going, it's a great relationship, and we want to thank. I know he was instrumental in getting that done for us. Another regional action there.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Mayor. So now we're on agenda item number 16, old and new business. I would ask that everyone please note that the HRPDC and the HRTPO Joint Personnel and Budget Committee will soon be requesting feedback on evaluating the executive director's performance during the past year. This request will be sent to everyone via email from Ms. Kelly Arledge, Please note it when you receive it and respond accordingly. Is there any old business that we need to discuss? Seeing none, is there any new business? Then, for the good of the order, this meeting is adjourned, and we will note the date and time. Have a safe rest of the week and weekend.